It's a riot. So we'll probably it's starting now, but you might be familiar that YouTube takes a minute to actually say that they're doing it.
Well, it says it's doing it.
There we go. And what I'm doing is I'm having this on unlisted YouTube, so it's only found through a through the link. All right, here we are. So I'd just love to start with, do you have a little description of yourself, who you are, what you're up to, where you live?
Who am I? What am I up to? I think who are you is one of the hardest questions anyone can really answer, and really that's the task of the lifetime, isn't it? Working out who we are, as opposed to who we've been told we are. So I'm Michael Foord. I'm a mystic. I'm a computer programmer and teacher. I'm a teacher in all sorts of ways, but I teach things like advanced programming, companies like Bloomberg, and I taught object-oriented theory with Python. Python is the language I use for Royal Ordnance Survey. So that's my professional life. I'm on the development team for Python, the programming language itself. My spiritual history, my spiritual credentials. Well, I was brought up an evangelical Christian, as many people were, and a true believer. And then I had a very difficult time in my adolescence, really subject of emotional abuse, really, and a very difficult time. And I ended up having psychosis on psychedelics, and ended up homeless and in prison. And then from there to a Christian cult, where I lived for 10 years as a true believer, with no money, no personal possessions other than my clothes, and we had no television. We didn't watch films or anything like that, and we lived for God. And it was very patriarchal, and there were all sorts of problems, and a lot of people got hurt. But it was a time for me of dedicating my life to seeking God. And then I moved out of there. I taught myself programming, and became very successful as a programmer, but wanted to return to my spiritual roots, to return to having something, to living for depth, and also to still resolve to find healing. A quest I'm still on, to find healing for the healing for what ails me, my spiritual sickness, my trauma, whatever you want to call it. So I returned to meditation. I've learned to meditate with some Buddhists, friends of the Western Buddhist Order in Cambridge while I'd been at university there. I studied law until I was thrown out for going mad, which I don't blame them for at all. And so I meditated for about an hour a day for about 7 or 8 years at that time, and really returned to a longing for depth and spirituality. And I'm not a Christian anymore, but I still pursue the divine. And I think that's the relevant parts of me.
That's wonderful and amazing. And so where do you find yourself now? How do you identify yourself? How do you think about your dance with the divine?
Dance with the divine. Yeah, that's lovely. Well, so I have lots of ways that I'm exploring that. I still meditate. My religion now is rational theistic Luciferianism. And Lucifer, the light bringer, the bright morning star, the son of the morning and the daughter of the evening, worshipped as Inanna and Ishtar and Astarte throughout history, as in her evening aspect as the goddess, and in the morning aspect of Eosphorus and Lucifer as male. And the light bringer is the source of the divine that I look to now.
Beautiful. So let's break this down a little more, because that's a big sentence. So first, rational. What are you talking about when you say rational?
Rational is intelligent, reasoned, thought out, and something that frustrates me about evangelicism is that we got taught this child's version of theology, dumbed down, that really, when you pull it apart, has no coherence or sense to it. And you go and look at the actual theology behind it, how we got these sacred texts, how we interpret these sacred texts, how what we've been told about these sacred texts has clearly been constructed by the authority of the church. We've got the sort of consensus by meetings, you know, and you look at the history of the church and you see the most appalling people involved in this, and the theology that is awful. And I wanted something more reasoned, with a not built on sand, built on firmer foundations. And so my explorations include philosophy, psychology, any understanding of the human spirit and the human relation to the divine has to be compatible with what we know about the human psyche and modern psychology. And if they're incompatible, then something is wrong. So we have to, our spirituality has to be informed by everything we know, by science, by psychology. This is the amazing thing about living now. The human animal, what we've constructed, is so incredible. Like the Tower of Babel, if you remember the legend, well, we're building it again, aren't we? But we know so much. And any spirituality that doesn't take into account the fact that the way we see the world and the way we understand the world has changed radically 4 times in the last century alone. Every generation sees a major change to their way of life and understanding of the world. And any spirituality that doesn't take into account that isn't informed by that and compatible with that is broken. So I wanted something rational. And it's rational theistic, because the modern atheism is very aggressive and very proud. And even the name rational theistic is a challenge. I tell people on Facebook forums, you know, I'm a rational theistic Luciferianism. And it's an offense to them, because in their minds, their choice is the only rational choice. And no, you know, that's to think that the way you think is the only rational way of thinking is an absurd arrogance. But the other thing is that we can pursue the divine in a rational way, without having to have certainty. We know that as, again, the human animal, we have this capacity to connect with the divine. And what that says about the objective existence of a creator God is absolutely nothing. That is the great unknown unknown, or the great, isn't it? But we know we can reach out and touch the divine. And so arguing about whether God exists or not is an absurd waste of time. It's let's get on and do it. Let's flow with life. Let's touch the divine. Let's be changed. Let's be able to be changed. Isn't that what we all really want? To be able to change, to find healing, to grow, to find strength, to be able to bring life to others. And that only comes through change. And I think the spirit of life, the essence of life, that's the way we find change. But it engages our mind. It's intelligent. It's not closing our eyes to the world. Yes.
The crowd goes wild over here.
Yeah, and Luciferianism.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right.
I revere the light bringer. I revere the light.
The light. And it's very interesting, because each of these words is kind of on its face opposite of the evangelical path. And so is that by design, or?
Yeah, it's almost exactly opposite. So Lucifer represents the rebel against God, doesn't he? The rebel. And what are we taught as Christians? We're taught to be obedient, but we're also taught that the system of this world is fallen and broken, and that we're all born into that. And the system of the world, established by predators for their own benefit, the pecking order and the social structure, predators hide in it. Predators sit themselves at the top of it. And the only way that you find your way out of that is by breaking the rules. If you're not willing to break the rules, you can't be free, because the rules will bind you up. So Lucifer is the great rebel. Shukta, the Hindu deity of Venus, was a rebel against Vishnu. So, and Lucifer is, for me, the individual, the individuated one. And it is directly the opposite of conventional Christianity, which is clearly a means of social conformity and control. I don't think many people outside of it would question that. And it's interesting because the other aspect of it is that for many Christians, Lucifer is a word of, of terror and horror, representing the devil, Satan. And this is where, for me, it's the childish theology comes in. It's like you're taught that Lucifer is the devil, the Satan, and that comes from the Bible. Well, find Lucifer in the Bible for me. And I'll tell you where Lucifer comes from. Lucifer comes from the King James translation. That's the only translation of the Bible where the word Lucifer comes from. So that's about 1600. It was probably, there was probably a convention for using Lucifer to refer to the devil prior to that. The medieval monks, they invented hell. They invented the name Jesus. Obviously, the Christ was not called Jesus. That's an anglicized version of the Greek transliteration of his Hebrew name, which was Yeshua, which translates into English as Joshua. It's a late Bible variant of the name Joshua. So there are all sorts of things that were invented by those monks. And Lucifer, they got that from the Vulgate, the Latin translation of the Bible, which was the translation of the Bible from about 300 AD, I think, all the way up to about 1100 AD. That was the main translation of the Bible. And there's one verse in Isaiah referring to King Nebuchadnezzar, and it's, how art thou fallen, whatever that verse is, that, the light bringer, and it refers to Venus in the Hebrew. And it's an allegory, but it's believed to be an allegory for Satan, but it's actually referring to King Nebuchadnezzar. And in the Latin, in the Vulgate translation of that verse, which is originally in Hebrew, light bringer is Lucifer. So that came into the King James Bible as Lucifer. Now, this idea that the Bible portrays a consistent story of a single enemy is really, doesn't really fit what's there. And Lucifer dates to 1600. It's not. And so a Christian taking a shallow view of my religion would be horrified and appalled, and some of them are. But it's like, do you realize how much of a misunderstanding of your own faith and your own text that is? And the nice thing about this is that it works. The dark and the light both work. The light works, the light aspect, Lucifer, the light bringer. Yes. But for those who make a shallow judgment, it's a name of fear, and the dark aspect works too. But it's much deeper than that. This entity, this deity, has been worshipped and revered, and these deities are where we put our greatest longings, the purest of our and strongest of our emotions and drives. They're the projection of all that it is to be human in this world, in this universe, in the purest sense. And they are a source of life within our psyche and our mind, and they've played this massive part in history. So culturally, they're part of us. Culturally, they've shaped and formed us. Whether you believe they have objective existence or not is irrelevant to the role that they've played in the role that the gods, the spirits, and the goddesses, the angels and the demons have played in the human psyche and shaping our experience of life and our understanding of life for as long as there have been humans. So we can reach out to the same divine inspiration, find the same divine life within our life as humans have done across all of history, and look with a deep sense of wonder and unknowing at all of this. And that, for me, is the rational approach to the divine, the reaching out to what is already part of us, to what has shaped us and shaped humanity.
Beautiful. In this moment, you're kind of reminding me of Joseph Campbell, just tying this to that, to this to that. Oh, and this goes here. Are you familiar with his work?
Yes. Particularly his work as it relates to Star Wars. But the hero's journey, his work is far more than that in comparative mythology. But that's the one thing that stands out, that he enunciated so clearly that it's so easy to understand, this common thread through
Yeah.
that's found in so many stories and so many, you know, the journey of the individual. And you have to be the hero of your own adventure, don't you? If you won't, there'll be other people all too willing to be the hero of your story, but make yourself the hero of your own adventure.
I'm so grateful to be talking to you. This is wonderful. Thank you. And you know, what you're talking about obviously has so much depth. I mean, are you teaching and sharing any of this in any way that's structured or?
So a lot of this is very live exploration for me. It's been a journey of my life, and but this format and this form, there's so much so much just came to life once I actually dropped Christianity, when I saw how awful the people that I'd given myself to for so long actually were, how committed to rules rather than life they were, and how not really committed to the deep love that I felt that they were. And this for me is the essence, is that I have touched both a deep peace and a quality of love that is like pure gold refined in the fire, and that is precious beyond any individual, and that is what I search for and what I will not give up searching for whilst I'm alive. So I have my website, michaelfoord.co.uk, and that's Foord with 2 O's, F-O-O-R-D, michaelfoord.co.uk. And there's Unpolished Musings on Facebook as well, where I share this. Now, you know, I have times of being quite prolific, and yeah, I hope to collect it together into books at some point. But for the moment, it's like a wellspring that comes and goes. There's a group called the Luciferian, and there's about 20,000. It's the biggest Luciferian group on Facebook, and I'm one of the moderators. And it's chaos. It's full of sort of every spiritual idea and craziness, and people at every level of maturity and immaturity, and it is utter chaos. But there's wonderful depth in there as well, and people finding life, and people letting go of convention and being willing to do something different because they want to do something with their life and they want to find depth. And that for me is beautiful and glorious, and I love the fire and the passion of it. So that's my playground, and where I post a lot of these things first. There's your Mystic Playground as well, where some of my content is. I don't tend to post the explicitly Luciferian stuff on your page, but a lot of some of the more mystical stuff. Well, it's like I don't want people to always feel like I'm having a go at them. You know, it's like a lot of my stuff is comes across as an affront to Christians who judge it. You know, and it's like well, that is your problem, but I don't need to upset you all the time.
Right. It's not my purpose to annoy you. I'm just trying to speak.
I want to be where I'm celebrated, you know, and enjoyed, where what I do is enjoyed.
It's almost like a need to recontextualize what, or maybe, you know, it would, if you use different words, what you're saying is awesome, but you want to use your words. And so that's great.
And very much that's what I'm doing. A lot of what I talk about is spiritual stuff that I found and learned in Christianity. Glossolalia is a part. I do ceremonial magic. The West has an esoteric tradition called ceremonial magic going back hundreds of years, and that's Western spirituality. And I practice that. I've lost thread. I've lost the track of what I was saying.
Recontextualizing and using.
Oh yeah, recontextualizing, right? But I use glossolalia. I use glossolalia as part of my ritual, because that is speaking in tongues. It's the release of pure psyche. It's releasing and expressing emotional and psychological content, bypassing the filter, the mental, the ego, which has to filter and interpret and limit everything, and just letting the life out. And I found that incredibly powerful. And I spent so much time as a Christian praying for healing with people, for psychological healing and physical healing. And that's not something that I just abandon, that desire to bring healing just because. So for me, it's like I say, you know, God has escaped the jaded sepulchre, and boy, are they pissed. It's the spirit of life is not limited by the church, and so it is deliberately recontextualizing a lot of what I've learned and explored in new language, in new ways, with new life in it, and bringing some of the insights that I found. Yeah, very deliberately expressing it in new ways.
Yeah. And there's so much need, there's so much hunger, there's so much searching that's going on, and people are not wanting to search in the church. So you're meeting a lot of
so
those
much baggage, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's such a hunger for something real, and it's there's so little is real, so little has any genuine solidity to it.
Yeah, and maybe as you did, people in the church or in Christianity or in structured religion, some people are finding what they need for now, and who knows what's going to happen, like you did.
Everyone's on a journey. Everyone's on. I think that for me, what I found and why I stayed in Christianity for so long is because of the worship. I think the worship is the most potent thing that evangelical Christianity has, and that's very genuine. And people have these very genuine experiences of spirituality and life and God in worship. They connect with life and they connect with God. And then it comes with this most awful doctrine. And it's presented as like you know, like in the Matrix, you know, take the red pill or the blue pill. It's like you've got to take the whole thing all in one go, you know. It's like so if you're in a church and you have a spiritual experience during worship, and you feel life like you've never felt it before, you're going to believe people when they say, and now you have to believe all of these things. And that gradually squeezes the life out of people. And that's why there's this cult of young people, because the people who haven't had the life squeezed out of them, you know, we can put them on stage and we can vicariously feel the life we used to know before the doctrine killed us all inside. And so it's finding and expressing that life, that worship, that where you take the boundaries off yourself. And I mean, for me, worship, the wild and abandoned adoration of love. I mean, isn't communal worship a beautiful and life-enhancing experience? You know, where it's genuine, and so it's taking that life out of the prison of dead doctrine, and finding new ways of expressing it in my life. Because the other problem is when people leave Christianity, all of that stuff gets left behind. You know, and there's a spiritual death that comes with that too. And it's like, for so many people, it's like, I can't be in the church. I can't believe those things anymore. You know, I can't be around people who believe in a literal Noah's Ark, don't believe in evolution, and think gay people are sinful. It's like, I can't live like that anymore. And yet there's this part of me that was nurtured and fed by the connection to life, and where does that go? And it's God is love. When we love God, when we worship, when we pour out who we are to the spirit of life, we're connecting with love. So, and it doesn't require a church setting or a church format. It doesn't require any doctrine at all to do that, but it does require a search, and that's the search I'm on. And I think that's, again, the great tragedy of Christianity, isn't it? That according to the books, Jesus said, seek and you will find. And Christianity so often is an end to seeking. It's an end to seeking. Here you go. Stop looking. This is what you believe. This is what you have to believe. And it's like, no, it's only when you're seeking that you find. And you have to be willing. If you're not willing to drop certain beliefs, if you have sacred cows that you're not willing to let go of, then how can you genuinely in your own heart know whether they are real or not, if the only acceptable answer is it's real? If you cannot face the possibility of it not being, how can your search be honest? And then if you settle in your heart that your search is going to be honest, you do have to be willing to actually change your mind. And that's so little of Christianity over the years has struck me as an honest search for truth. So little of it, and it's so appalling, such a blasphemy, really.
Yes, preach it.
Thank you.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, that for me was
yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
God. No. Keep going.
I think I've come
that
to
for
stop.
me. Okay, great. I did. What you're talking about is these days often called deconstruction. I mean, it's a relatively new word applied to how people are working themselves out of the bounds. Do you relate to that word? Do you relate to
I do. So Jung said something very interesting, which I think resonates with a lot of people, and does with me too. He said that the first half of life is concerned with constructing a strong enough ego to cope with life. And then the second half of life is concerned with dismantling that ego in order to go deeper and understand yourself. And it's like, nobody is responsible for who they are as an adolescent. As you become an adult, your personality is the product of your genetics and your upbringing. And you are who you've been made into. Yeah. And that usually involves a lot of trauma, and for most people, I think, are traumatized. It's the norm. And so you spend the early part of your life just trying to survive and cope. And eventually, hopefully, you get to a situation where you're stable enough and strong enough that you can go, that hurt like hell. What's life all about? And that you find that all of these coping mechanisms and boundaries and limitations and ways of seeing the world are actually what obstructs us from really understanding and seeing ourselves. And so that process of deconstruction, that taking apart, the looking deeper, who really am I? You know, what's really inside? And I think it's one of the religions I follow is a religion called Telema. Telema is a Greek word for will, and it has a couple of precepts. Love is the law, love under will, and do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Do as you will shall be the whole of the law. And a lot of people criticize and say it's just saying do what you want, but it's not. It has this idea of a true will, that we all are. We have a personality, an inner genius. Without exception, everyone has an inner genius, which, if we were fully free and fully released, is who we would be, and is therefore who we need to be in order to be fully free and fully fulfilled and fully released. And therefore, in order to be the best that we can be, that's who we need to be. And so if you want to make the most difference in the world that you can, you have a responsibility to find and release this inner genius, to be the best that you can be. And society so blinds us with rules. Monogamy is a religion of its own, unquestioned. Don't take drugs, don't explore your mind. And so I think there are so many things that people just won't consider. And if you won't do any of these things, if you won't explore any of these things, how the hell do you know who you really are? How the hell do you know whether that's really who you are or not, if you're not even willing to consider it? So I'm fairly radical, and say, look, do whatever it takes to be a free person, because the people around you, crabs in a bucket. Everyone wants to keep people in our place. Don't we like our place in society? The people we're above, the people we give little digs to, and the people, the authorities that we look to, the social rules, the social systems that we construct out of unconscious habit, hold everyone in their place. And if you want to be free, if you want to be the best person that you can be, if you want to get the most out of life, if you want to find deep healing and deep fulfillment, you have to be willing to explore who you are. You have to be willing to break the rules. If you won't break the rules, you can't be free, because the rules will manipulate you and push you around. There's no life in rules. That's the love is the law, love under will, this other precept from Thelema. And when I first heard it as a young man, just started taking drugs, not long having sort of left Christianity behind, but my immediate thinking, that is the most concise retelling of the whole story arc of Old Testament to New that I've ever heard. Love is the law, love under will. Because the Old Testament, the exploration of how do we be right with God? What is the law that we should be living our life by? And obviously there are things that we should do and things that we shouldn't do. And there's a price to be paid for breaking the law. And so you look through Leviticus, and most of Leviticus actually happens in Numbers, and it's this sort of massive contradictory rules. And then the story of Jesus is saying, well, actually, rules cannot bring salvation. Rules, the law, can only condemn. But the price has been paid, hasn't it? That's the mystical message of the cross. It is finished. The price is already paid. And the law has been perfected and fulfilled. And now love is the law. And where we fulfill the law, we do not sin. And where we love, we fulfill the law. So the only rule is love. And all these other rules that we put in place, you can only come to God if you're not gay, you can only come to God if you're celibate or married, all of these rules, completely artificial, human understanding. Love is the law, love under will. We choose to love. And where we love, where we fulfill the law and we do not sin. And by grace we can love.
Amen. Beautiful. I do have a question though. How, just like you were talking about something else, how do you know it's the real, the true, the deep love, not the let's get it on.
It's a search, isn't it?
And
It's
that's
an
not like it's not,
search.
but
yeah. So I mean,
so it's just the spiraling in.
I think a love of depth helps, and a determination that you're going to find it. If you that's a good question. I mean, so if we step back looking at love itself, I always say that a good rule of thumb for whether you're loving someone or not is whether they feel loved. But the deep love, well, it's not an absolute thing, is it? Because sometimes loving people means upsetting them. But as a general rule,
yes,
you can, if somebody feels loved, you're doing a good job of loving them. I think it's that thirst and that hunger, isn't it? It's that knowledge that there is more, that there is a fire, there is a wellspring. And if what we found is vague and weak and intangible, that ain't it. That ain't it, because the fire that I know, that I've touched, it ain't weak and it ain't intangible. And there's this thing in evangelical Christianity, isn't there? Don't go for experiences. Don't go for experiences. You see people who claim to have these profound experiences, and they're weak people blown around by the winds. And yeah, sure, don't be like that. But also, all of the preachers with all of their doctrines, they were never the ones who really had the spiritual experiences, were they? In worship, the dry, the dead theology. It's like either we know God or we don't. Let's actually know and experience the life of God, and that be the touchstone. If your doctrine and theology doesn't bring real experiences of God, I mean, Christianity is full of these promises of God, and they so rarely are fulfilled. And Christians tell the most awful lies about it, don't they? To try and encourage each other and to build up our faith. And then you can never tell, you can never find the depth, because everyone's trying to believe all the time, and there's no depth to it. Yeah, intensity of experience is something to go by. It's not nothing. If you don't know and experience the life of God in a visceral way, you ain't that close to God. Because that's another way of phrasing the message of the Christ, isn't it? God can be known. The veil is torn, you know? And so if we're not doing it, if we're not in the presence of God, if that divine life is not in us, then we ain't doing it.
Right. I would say it's his main, what he was constantly babbling about is that the reign of God is here, that heaven is here.
The kingdom of heaven is now. The kingdom of heaven is now, and it's found in shared lives. Yes.
That's
living in community.
The main thing he said, as far as I'm concerned.
Everywhere he went, the kingdom is here. The kingdom is here. The kingdom has arrived. The kingdom of heaven is now. It's not jam tomorrow. The kingdom of heaven is now. So let's do it again. Let's find it. Let's prove it. Let's make it real.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's real. Because it's real. And I'm so grateful for you to be sharing with passion this reality, because it's real. And so many are hungry for it. And so many have tasted a little and then accepted that's enough. But like more and more, you know, let our thirst make us more thirsty, the Sufis say. Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. So you want to keep going?
How long have we been going? We've got 45 minutes. Do you have any more questions?
Oh, buddy, I do. I really love this whole thing about I don't want to talk bad about Christianity. It's not the point. I think humans do this, but all those promises in scripture, all that like deliciousness of life that's available, the life abundantly, there's promise after promise. I did a really long writing about this a while ago, and people have either they've given up that that's possible, or pretending that they're in it when they're not. And from my experience, the promises are true. All that crap is true. It's real. It's here. It's now. It's available if we're willing. If we're willing to let the clouds fall away and let the sun shine on us. What
I agree.
Can you say more about that? Because it's so important.
I think that the conventional Christianity is so far from where it needs to be to experience that in terms of genuinely accepting people. It doesn't. You say it's real, and yes, and I found it in strange places. I found it in the Burning Man community. I went to an event in Ohio, deep in darkest Ohio, in an abandoned strip mine amongst the razor grass. They have this in a field used only for Boy Scout expeditions and extravagant parties. They hold this little festival called the Mosaic Experiment, and it's one of the many regional Burning Man events that happens across the world. And it was my first introduction. And when you arrive, they hug you and they say, "Welcome home." And the core ethos, one of their principles that struck me, radical inclusion. Radical inclusion, and that's the kingdom. That's the kingdom of heaven.
Yes.
Where you don't just tolerate people, but everyone is included. You make sure everyone is included, whoever they are. And you don't judge them for their sexuality or for their mental health problems. And you don't put yourself on a pedestal above everyone else, trying to make everyone else follow the rules. It's let's have fun, and everyone's included. And that, for me, I came into it and it's like, yes, this is it. This is the kingdom where we love one another without question.
Yes.
And I go into churches and I just don't find it. I just don't find it. I'm polyamorous. My wife and I both polyamorous, and there's an event for ethical non-monogamy in Brighton. We used to drive down to that a few times, and it's the same. the same atmosphere, the same culture. So I find this life, I find the life in all sorts of interesting places.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. We're getting to that. So we're making the transition to like what it looks like in the real world. I'm poly too. And I found a real flexibility, love, openness, but we bring all our crap with us too, I think.
Yeah.
So I've also found
it was,
a lot of
yeah, it was
rules
one of the
and
most painful
doctrine and
experiences.
say again.
Sorry, go. It was one of the most painful experiences of my life. It's sort of working through all of the issues with that, associated
Yes.
particularly with poly. Anyway, that was just an
Yeah.
interjection. I interrupted you.
No,
Sorry.
please go. Like it's a tough journey I used to call it clearing my slut pictures. There was a lot to it, and there still is. It doesn't end. It's a conscious, creative way to live. So, what has come out of that for you? What do you notice in real life, not theory?
So it's been a very painful journey for various reasons. I kind of did all of my crises in one go. I went self-employed. I abandoned Christianity. I reset my relationship with my family so that they had to treat me with respect. And we went polyamorous. And so I kind of lost that, just about alienated just about everyone in my life. And yeah, it was horribly painful. Kind of come through that. It was very difficult between me and my wife. The marriage nearly didn't survive, but it's come through. There's a great deal of life in it. She's found an enormous amount of freedom in it, which I told her she would. But the thing that's for me is that I am now free to be who I want to be. For the first time in my life, really, I am completely free to be me, whatever that means. To explore that and that's joy. That's life. Who I am is not decided by anyone else. And yeah, and that's, for me, that's the most important thing. That's that freedom, that liberty, that liberation, that freedom from other people's rotten ideas about sex and sexuality. And the ability to find out for myself without judgment. And to discover who I really am, and to discover that so much of who I've been so ashamed of most of my life is actually the best and most beautiful part of me. And to find freedom and life to the parts of myself that I've rejected all this time.
I'm just time marking. That's just so beautiful. I have to 48 minutes, brothers. I mean, that is just gold right there. That's so beautiful. Like the very, Campbell says that what we really need is in the cave we fear to enter.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
The shadow work of Jung, and the projection of the devil. Again, this is where Luciferianism is. For so much of religion, the temptation, isn't it? Temptation is of the devil. And it's like, that's not the devil. That's your own soul crying out to you that you're not happy. So that devil that you point to, that's my God. That's freedom and life. And you call it the devil.
Yes. Yes. And for me, the temptations are much more subtle. Yes. Awesome. So how does this look? Just, because I'm sure people are interested in this. It's a very interesting conversation about polyamory. How does this complete freedom in life, in your sexuality, how does that dance with your wife? How does that dance in relationship over time? What does it look like?
So the thing that I love that we discovered about polyamory is that, and labels are so useful, I think, because they convey and communicate so much, because language is so rich and complex. Ethical non-monogamy.
Yeah.
It's like people assume that just because you don't have their morality, that you have no morality. And that's a horrible, judgmental attitude. It's like, of course, we are ethical because we want to be, because not being ethical in relationships causes you all sorts of problems.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to work that out. We have a couple at the moment. I mean, with COVID, it's like a lot of it has been more theoretical than practical over the last year, which has been good because it's been a great time for our relationship to sort of cement and find healing. And I've sort of hibernated because I've been finding a lot of healing myself. I've sort of dug back into meditation. My work situation is lovely in that I'm paid fairly ridiculous amounts for the training when it happens. So I can do training and then have gaps where I write and do all sorts of. So I've done a lot of meditation. I've been meditating 2 or 3 hours a day. Straight mindfulness of breathing, as taught by the Buddha, an exercise for developing focus and concentration, and for letting the mind unfurl, for the practice of letting go of thoughts. I found so much healing through it. So it's not really been the focus of our lives recently, but Delia has a couple of partners that she has a lovely relationship with, that sees occasionally. I have a long distance partner who I haven't seen for a little bit of time. We'll go and see him up in Liverpool fairly soon. And sometimes we explore together and go to clubs and things like that. So it's an aspect of our life and a part of our life, and we have to work that together, manage the emotions and manage the sort of the amount of time
Yes, time.
it takes up, but it just becomes part of our life. Yeah, it's not so different really. We're still mostly together. Over the last year, it hasn't made any practical difference to compared to any other married couple, other than maybe a couple of surreptitious visits, maybe not. But yeah, so I'm not sure if that's what you were getting at, but there's something.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's the what happens, but I think more importantly is the who we're being ourselves, and in
Right.
all
Yeah,
that
yeah,
freedom, all that truth, all that trust, all those agreement makings, all that,
yeah.
right? That really is very conscious.
Mm-hmm.
And
So Delia was very upset when I first introduced polyamory. This was a few years ago, and for her, the thing that it was that I was breaking the illusion that I was her all and she was my all, and it was that fantasy, that fairy tale fantasy, went away, and then we had a long period of working it out. And the relationship really, again, has had to be reformed, but this time on the basis of reality. It's not, she doesn't look at me and see me as this superhero husband who is her everything like she used to. And there's aspects of that I miss. She sees me with much more realistic eyes, and we've had an interesting relationship. We've been married 17 years. The first 12 years, we didn't argue once, because she was finding a lot of healing, and I knew she couldn't cope with it. So we did not argue. We had half an argument in 12 years.
wow.
And then the incredible stress of changing the dynamic of the relationship, well, we argued an awful lot. We made up for it. But it's like we've now re-established the relationship is so much more honest and so much more real. And there's a bit more pain in it, but it's much better. We're not living a fantasy, we're living a different kind of fantasy, much more real one.
Yes. It's a hard transition, though. I know for me, the romantic fantasies were like, honestly, one of the biggest things I've given up in my life is that romantic fantasy of romantic notions of, the prince on the white horse or whatever. you know, and
The
everything is
codependent
great.
relationship.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
think, yeah.
that.
That's the romantic ideal, isn't it? The romantic ideal is for a woman with weak emotions to find a man who can't express his emotions, and between them, these two half humans make one monster. And that's, you know, that's what everyone is chasing.
But it's really fun. It's really fun till it's not. It's really fun in the infatuation stage, the NRE. Yeah. So, okay, great, beautiful, thank you. And then this whole journey you've been on with mental illness. Do you want to talk more about that and what you learned and what were the gifts?
So I don't actually like the term mental illness, because as far as I'm concerned, my mind has always performed exactly as it should under the circumstances under which I put it. So the psychosis was, although it was enabled by the drugs, really it was, the cause of that was me running away from my problems, part of which was a Great Depression, and that came out of, and then, so that was the psychosis. That was a real madness, which was a very interesting, horribly painful, worse, you know, agonizingly painful over a period of years. And then, so about the age of 37, I was working as a programmer, and I remembered as a child that people who were 40, they were really old. That was what it meant to be old. And this was 37, and I was coming up to it. And you know, and I'd done a bunch of stuff with my life, but it was like, if I want my life to actually be about something, if I want to achieve something and be someone and do something, either I start doing it now, or it just never happens. And that was sort of like the proper spiritual reawakening. That was when I turned to the meditation, turned back to psychedelic drugs as well, to revisit that part of my life and what I'd seen in them that was genuine. And I learned such a lot from that. But that really woke up the hunger, and I started worshiping with everything that I had. I was still very much committed to the church, and worshipping 3 times a week. I had singing lessons with a classically, you know, I've got an operatic strength voice, and singing lessons with a classic singing teacher to sharpen my sword, and I gave it everything. And that in itself is a whole story and a whole journey. There's an article on my website, Psychotherapy, Meditation and Worship, which is about that part of the journey. But that actually led into a Great Depression. It was like it uncovered the depression that had been there. I found so much healing, uncovered so much in the meditation, and it opened up this chasm of sort of dissatisfaction. And it was a real, you know, my executive function was massively impaired. I was on antidepressants for a while. It was, but again, it's like I don't see that as a mental illness. I see that as my soul and psyche's natural response to the situation. I wasn't being me. I wasn't free. I wasn't, and the way I was living, I couldn't be free and happy. And I had, and that, and I think this is what depression so often is. It's your spirit's way of saying, you know, the way you are living, the person you are pretending to be, I cannot do it anymore. And so it falls under the mental health umbrella. But Jung called it wrestling the leaden angel. I did find antidepressants helpful through the worst of it, but I didn't stay on them for very long. And finding my way out of that through changing my life, and changing my life required me to be willing to upset people. That was how I came through that. So that's I have an amazing psychotherapist as well. Grey Matters Psychotherapy in London. We have we do it by Zoom, and she's amazing. She's fantastic. Jungian psychotherapist. I've been with her nearly 3 years now. So yeah, psychotherapy is one of the religions I proselytize.
Yeah, and Can you say why? It's the magic in it.
So for me, a good therapist is a great big mirror to reflect yourself back to you. And I mean, this is the injunction. There's the Greek, I forget, but the injunction to know thyself. First, know thyself, understand yourself, because who we are, our conception of ourselves is our ego, the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and about other people, and we've been shaped in relation to the world. So our conception of ourselves is inextricably intertwined with how we see the world. And so in order to see the world as it is, to understand the world, we have to investigate ourselves. We have to understand ourselves, because we cannot understand ourselves separately from our relationship to the world, and the world cannot be understood separately from our relationship to us. So it's part of that journey of exploration. And it's so the thing I found about community when I moved into the Christian community, they had this emphasis on sharing, opening yourself up and share it, and being accepted without judgment. And that aspect of it was very much like the radical inclusion. We had this song, let us open us up ourselves to one another without fear of being hurt or turned away. And I found in those close relationships, it was an incredibly sort of compressed living situation. But if you could fit into the narrow lines of the rules, and I'm sort of mostly heterosexual, and so living within the rules was not that hard, you know, but I could do it. I didn't have any choice. It was either be in this community or be homeless and die on the streets, but I could do it. And within those constraints, that closeness, being bound that closely in a cause with people that you're living for, that you've sacrificed everything for, there's that gold, there's that quality of love, being unified in passion and purpose and love and acceptance. And so it was that being able to open myself up and find acceptance, that where the first healing started to happen. And psychotherapy is one very good venue for that as well. But really it's this function of the therapist as a giant mirror to show yourself. I mean, when it was coming up to the death of my father, which happened a few weeks ago, in the months leading up to that, I have a very difficult relationship with my father. But Deb, she challenged me about you know, are you sure you're happy with the way you're handling this relationship? And she made me dig into myself and argue with her and say, yes, this really is how I feel. This is, I can't do anything else. But that process of having someone challenge me is, you know, and say, you know, I know that I've dug into myself. I know that I've really questioned myself because of my relationship with her and the way she challenged me. So it's been enormously useful to me.
Beautiful.
Yeah. But I think the first challenge is to know and understand yourself, and I think that spirituality means with everything, fight on all fronts: psychotherapy, meditation, worship, psychedelics, relationships, sharing with people, the search for healing, the search to bring life should find expression in all of who we are, to be one person, a single person. The single-minded person, the double-minded person is unstable in all their ways. You know, but it's the real magic happens when the core, the nub of your life, the very center is set, is determined, will not look back. I am going to seek life. I am going to do it, whatever the cost. And that's what, because there will always be obstacles. And if you can be turned aside, if you can be turned away, then you will. And it's where that core of your life is set, the determination. I am going to make an honest search for truth, and I'm going to, that if that means changing my mind and facing up to being wrong, I will do that. If it means standing my ground when everyone else tells me I'm wrong, I will do that. It's that's building your life on the rock. You know,
Yes.
A Greek philosopher said, my legs and maybe in chains and fetters, but my will's use himself could not turn. And telema, meaning the Greek word for will and love, in the Greek numerology. They both have the number 90, both have the value 93, which means there's this this mystical correspondence that will and love on some level are the same idea. And so where we set our will that it cannot be turned away on seeking love, we find it, however arduous the journey may have to be.
Yes. I'm really enjoying this. I mean, I'm writing and I'm listening, but there's part of me that's like that you're hitting the bell of truth so much and so many times. I'm so blessed. I'm just so blessed.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really encouraging. Thank you.
Really, yes. And I really appreciate your voice in the world. You know, I'm being reminded, I hope this is good news. My partner says to me all the time, you know, he can only take so much of this kind of thing, by the way. And, but he's like, Wendy, he wants to read nothing that I write. I get too intellectual. I get too, whatever it is. He's just like, he wants to read nothing that I write, but he will listen to me. And that's what I feel like sometimes I read your stuff and it's really dense, you know, it's really, it's great. It's not as accessible as you're speaking. That's my experience. And I just wonder, right, like, because it's real and it's embodied with your love and your life in a different way. And it's really, really landing. So I just wanted to give you that feedback.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I do quite a lot that is short snippets. And I find that goes down quite well. Because I think you can express something powerful in without having to use. So I like to do the longer explorations, and I sort of yearn to produce more, and I have whole sort of reams of stuff that I want to explore. But I think often, particularly for communicating via Facebook, that small and often is more powerful. For me, the thing is that writing is like talking, like explaining myself. You know, this is the value of psychotherapy. I've got someone, that's how I work out what I think. That's how I see what I think. And so for me, writing is often not just sort of releasing a burden of something I want to express and convey, but the writing itself is the exploration of the subject matter. And I think that's so true of so many things. The work of Jung is a particular example. It's like the vast amounts of stuff he produced was him working out all of these ideas which have fed into society. And you can actually understand the core of much of what Jung was talking about now as very simple ideas, because they've worked their way through society. They've become part of our sort of common understanding. And that actually the best way to understand Jung is not to read the vast reams that Jung produced, but to read the summaries where ideas have been. So for me, particularly this is where programming comes in. Programming is all about abstract ideas. And in Python, the reason I love the language is because the focus is on simplicity and clarity. And in the Python programming world, if someone tells you your code is clever, it's not a compliment. It's like, ooh, that's really clever. No idea what it does. It's like, but if your code is the goal, because the thing is about writing code is you read it 10 times more than you write it. So the goal is to communicate and convey intent. And so I think I'm searching for simplicity and clarity. And and sometimes that takes an awful lot of writing I might write, 3 articles on a topic, and then a year later I can express as much in 1 paragraph. Because the ideas have worked through. So I think it's that search for simplicity and clarity is important. Yeah, and I don't always get there, I'm sure. And I do love talking. I do love speaking. I'd like to get into video work, and I have some poems and stuff that I can read and talk about that I think are fun, and convey life. So I would like to get into that. But
and and the life that you are, the love that you are, the truth that you are is so clear this way. Like you're bringing your beingness, not just your thoughts. And your beingness is truly a gift to be with. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm not finishing. I just want to say that. I'm not trying to get you off. Anyway, it's really cool. My partner likes to say that code is a distillation of thought, and that's pretty much what you just said. You know.
Oh yeah, exactly. The interesting thing about code is it has no concrete existence whatsoever. You know, it's expressed as text, as words on a screen, but it's stored as magnetic patterns.
Yes.
And so we build in code, we build these ideas, these concepts, we define objects, and they have no concrete existence, but they're pure abstract thought form.
Yes.
That is what they are. And they it's a two-way communication between the code deterministically drives the machine. So we bend the machine, make it conform to our will, but also the code communicates back to the human. So it's language, it's pure abstract language, pure thought form. Yes, it's very interesting, and I think is yes,
yeah, and that's what we're going for with these esoteric things that we're talking about.
Right. What existence, what tangible, concrete existence does a deity have? It's the same kind of existence. But the interesting thing is, you know, our understanding of psychology. It's like that's our whole experience of life. Everything about life, in terms of our experience and understanding of it, happens inside the mind, inside the sort of few pounds of sort of soggy bacon powered by electricity. You know, it's salt, fat, and electricity. And, you know, all of our life happens inside there. You know, we're all bags of meat walking around hallucinating vividly. So everything about life has that same nature of existence, which is why I think you spend a lot of time thinking about programming. It's like, this is a metaphor for life. You know, it's like, what's the reality of a friendship? What's the reality of culture? What's the reality of society? They're all abstract, and they exist collectively between us, outside us, but they're only but it only happens inside the minds of every single individual. Outside, you know, outside of, so it's the same quality of existence. Mm-hmm. And so spirituality, you know, there's a seamless spectrum and blend. There's a seamless connection between the mundane, society, culture, life, and the deities and the gods and the you know, the thought forms in this, but they exist in the same realm of existence within our psyche, within our experience of life. And that sort of stuff is very hard to express and explore without a lot of words. Thank you very much.
You did it in pretty short words. But I do.
But making it real, making it tangible. How do you make it mean something? It's like,
yeah, well,
it's hard.
That's ritual, right?
Right. Yeah. Ritual and ceremony. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh God, there's so many things I want to talk about. So, I just want to be clear. So you're saying it all happens in the bacon, and I wonder, do you think there's anything more than that? Like, what is there? I mean, we're talking about spirituality. We're talking about mysticism. Is there any how does that? Oh, I'm hearing myself back. Are you?
So you're talking about the objective existence of God,
or spirit, or something that's beyond the material.
So there's another article on my website which I wrote a long time ago when I was still a Christian. Is a rational faith. That's what it's called, towards a rational faith, something like that. Crossing the soul gap, a rational faith. And it was from the presence. It's asking this exact question, but from a Christian perspective. It was like, how can I know whether this is true or not? And for me, the essence was, well, if it's true, then it ought to be possible to bring healing to other people. And if it's objectively absolutely true, that should extend to things, you know, the things that like healing broken bones or whatever. We should be able to make changes in the physical world, but we don't see that very often. So for me, it was a question of there's two steps. There's first of all, can I make a difference to another person? Can the life in me, my spirit, or the spirit in me, can that cause changes in another person? And that's crossing the soul gap.
Yes.
And then there's crossing the air gap. Can we make a difference in the? So for me, that's the search, isn't it? But then once you start to think about that, you say, well, actually, my soul, my psyche, my mind clearly is able to affect change in another person's soul and mind, because my presence will change their mood. I can say something which will have an effect with them. So very obviously, that aspect of spirituality and Christianity, of faith or whatever, has a straightforward basis in fact. It's like my psyche can affect the psyche of another person, because my mere presence in their awareness is a change in their psyche. And so therefore the question of, is it possible for one human to bring psychological healing to another human? It's like, well, yes, it's evidently clear that one human individual can affect the psyche of another human individual. And therefore, if healing is possible, and we know healing is possible, it's possible for one person to bring it to another. And so that's sort of, you know, it's clearly there. There's truth and potential there, because of the connection that one human can have to another. And so spirituality then is the study or the flowing with whatever that is, whatever that connection is. Take that actual, tangible, practical connection in life and learn, how do I best actually love people in practice, you know, in ways that makes a difference to their life. But, you know, how do I make my life make a difference? And it's clearly possible. And if it's possible, I want to do it. I won't sing about it. I won't claim I believe it and not experience it. What a waste of a life. What a fake way to live.
Beautiful. And I so appreciate your passion. I mean, your emotions are all right there. You have the full spectrum, you know, and you're willing to bring it. Are you conscious about how vociferous you are? Also, it seems like, you know, things, you know, you let yourself drag yourself, you let yourself run in different directions with your attention and your energy. There's a beautiful allowing of the full human going on.
I think that's so much the function of the ego, isn't it? To limit what we will do, because we don't trust ourselves if we really let go. If I said just what I thought. And so that's the function of the ego, to limit our capacities. And I've got into terrible troubles and had all sorts of difficulties because I've just, you know, I've taken the limits off what I will do and who I will be. But I trust myself, you know, I trust in my capacity to learn and to, and the other aspect of this is, it's another aspect of the meaning of shadow work, is being the whole person, not repressing your nasty side and telling yourself you're a nice person. I think so much of, you know, concern and disapproval and, you know, is just repressed nastiness. When you're on the receiving end of another person's concern or their disapproval, it's nastiness, but they think they're nice people, you know. So let's own it. You know, there are things I stand against and I will stand against them. And there are things that, and taking these limits off, it means I can experience real joy. You know, the passion is what it's all about. Passion works. Passion moves things, changes things. This, as when I learned Python, and I was living in community, and I started using it for some of the, you know, writing little programs for administrative tasks that I was doing for my role in the community. And it's like my mind came alive. I found this framework that I could think in and create and build things. And Python is open source. Anyone can contribute and join in. There's this community, this one. And at the time, it was a small language, an obscure language. So the only people using it were people who really loved it. So it was this community that was full of passion. And I came alive with this passion, and I achieved enormous things. I became a core developer within a couple of years, and I wrote this tool which became part of the testing library. I maintained and changed the testing library. I wrote a book. I built a community around I and Python. I helped maintain the website. It was like the passion overtook me. And it's like, that's what, and through it, achieving things seemed effortless. You know, I didn't do them because I ought to do them. I did them because I really enjoyed doing it and I found life in it. And that's where the passion was. The work was effortless. And this is in meditation, there's this place called jhana or dhyanas in mindfulness of breathing. And it's a flow state, programmers call it, but it's in where you're breathing and you're focusing on the breath, your awareness is in the breath, you're trying to, in a sense, you become the breath. But distractions comes, thoughts and feelings, and you learn to let go of these, not to fight them, to let go. And there comes a point where you've let go of these distractions far enough that your focus is uninterrupted, and all there is the breath, and time stands still and stops, and you just have how long have I been doing this? And it's the most incredible, beautiful feeling. And usually just noticing is enough to distract it. But I described it as stepping back into the garden of the mind, where the work of tending the garden is the same as the work of enjoying it. The effort of focus becomes effortless. The work of meditation becomes effortless. And this is when the human mind is working in harmony with itself. And it's so that passion, enjoyment, this is the thing about spirituality. This is the thing about how our humanity works, that we achieve the most. We are the most powerful and the most released and the most capable when we're enjoying what we're doing, when passion is alive. And don't the grey faces kill passion. Don't the grey faces kill passion. Don't let your passion die. Passion, be passionate about passion. The only true passion is passion herself. All other passions are but a pale reflection.
Amen. Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being passionate about passion. I'm hope, certainly you're certainly inspiring me and moving me, and I hope whoever listens.
I hope so.
Yeah. So it's so interesting when you were talking about following your passion around Python. You followed it, and it's like the classic, people are talking about a life of purpose and how do you find it and what's your purpose, and you found it through following your bliss. You found it through following your passion and sharing that and building community around that, and and then it started giving back to you by you have really come into what could be called success about it, and leadership, and really a place to make a huge difference and be able to have money flow, so that's not the limiting factor.
It's a great privilege.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. You followed your bliss into your
I express it as the meaning and purpose of life is to find meaning and purpose in life. If you want meaning and purpose in your life, you have to look for it. It's the same search. It's the seeking, and it's in the seeking that you find. I mean, there's a beautiful philosophy, cheerful, positive nihilism, which I think expresses this. It's like if you look at physics, you could say, well, the universe kind of came out of nothing, and we're heading towards the heat death of the universe. One day it's all going to fade away. So there's no inherent meaning or purpose in any of it. But what that means, if there's no inherent underlying meaning and purpose, the meaning and purpose that we create, that we invest in life, that's as much meaning and purpose as you can have. So therefore, as much meaning and purpose as it's possible to have in life is within our grasp. And all we have to do is do it. Meaning and purpose that we find and that we create and that we invest in life is true meaning and purpose. And all we have to do is do it. So I think it's my fallback philosophy. It's not that I necessarily see that sort of nihilism as the ultimate state of the universe, But it's like, even if I don't believe anything else, even if I can't believe anything else, it's still worth it for those reasons alone. Just because the alternative is to not do it, to not find, to not look for meaning and purpose in life. And we can.
Yes, but then we don't have meaning and purpose, and life becomes really flavorless.
Yeah. That was Viktor Frankl, wasn't it? Man's logotherapy, man's search for meaning. He saw that in the concentration camps, that the people who kept meaning and purpose in that, even in those horrible places, those were the ones who kept going, who survived. And that for him was the core of life. And I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah. It doesn't only keep us alive, it makes being alive worth it.
Yeah, it's gives you a reason to dig in and find that extra bit, even when there's nothing else. And it's that clinging on that there's strength.
Yeah. And that muscle, I wonder if that's your experience. Mine is like this. The muscle that builds in that turn, in all that grist, the muscle that builds, then when that there's some resolution into a new consciousness, that muscle's still there to do something with. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. Okay. I have so many notes. Go ahead.
I think I'm going to have to go and get some tea for my family.
Okay, so you need to transition out?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. I will conclude by saying, one of the things that I keep hearing is in what you're sharing is when Jesus is talking, it might be Matthew 7, he's talking about how to live. And he's talking about all this stuff, how to live, like, don't worry about getting clothes and stuff. And in the middle of this, he says, in the very middle of it, he says, if your eye is single or simple, simple, it's like a word that means both, the body's full of light.
Interesting.
And that keeps resonating because you're really into light, and also you've been talking about like focus.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds like the third eye of occult mysticism.
Sure, third eye.
The true sight.
I hear him that way, but I also hear him about like focus. It's not just about seeing, but it's creating
It's
through.
The single, right? The single sight.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think. Yes, I think if you live your life from an actual philosophy, if you actually have something you're trying to do with your life, it gives you a framework and tools for understanding and interacting with life. So at the very core can be very simple, and life proceed out of that. Whereas if we just deal with life and life's complexities bit at a time and never really get to the root and the core, we never have. There's never that simplicity at the heart which says, I know who I am and what I'm doing. There's a lot of details to work out, but I know who I am and I know what I'm doing. That's simple faith at the very heart, the very core of who we are.
Gorgeous. Brother, thank you so much. I really, really, I'm so glad to be in your presence. I'm so glad to have time with you. And I'm really grateful for you to share so much wisdom with us.
Oh, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it too. It's been lovely to talk to you.